Disclaimer, I'm a law student, and the legal information provided is not legal advice. For that, please hire an attorney. Hi. Let's begin with a hypothetical. Let's say that you have a leftist content creator. Let's say that this leftist content creator has been recently exploring a lot of different ways to present what she wants to talk about on this social platform. Let's say that this content creator has tried out a couple different ways, video essays, mediating the space, and a couple things in between. Let's say that something else that this person described, or something else that this person tried out, was debating. And let's say that this person had a debate with someone who has some, shall we say, not great views. And let's say that this debate goes over wonderfully. Hooray. Let's say that this person gets a lot of attention for it. And let's say that this person, who is a relatively small content creator, actually gets someone to make a video covering, like, an entire opinion piece covering the debate that she had with this other person. And let's say that this person, the content creator, largely likes the video, but feels like there are some places where she was pretty seriously misrepresented and feels like there are some serious red flags to put up. Question: how should she go about dealing with this? So hi everyone, welcome. We're doing 2 days in a row because I've been working for 2 weeks on legal analysis and you deserve it. I love y'all, you're great. Today we're actually going to be having another guest on here. I'd like to make this into a more regular sort of occurrence for the channel. Today we're going to be having probably a discussion. I'm just trying to predict how it's going to go. I'm thinking something similar to my discussion with Zoomer Nation yesterday. I'm going to be having on a creator. I'm going to have on a creator named Mo Stebbings, who made a video actually sort of commenting on my debate that I had. Like a couple weeks ago? I watched it. I commented. I largely liked the video. There are some parts of it which I feel I was misrepresented on, and there are some really big flags that I want to talk about. I reached out to Mo and I offered to bring them on, and they accepted. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring them up into the call. Mo, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, yeah.
All right, we got there.
Yay!
Yeah. Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing just all right. So what time is it where you're at?
It's 9 in the morning.
Oh, wow. I drastically misread that. I thought you said it was going to be 9 p.m. Oh, wow. So you're just getting up for the day?
I thought it was, but I was very wrong.
Yeah. No, you're completely fine. As long as you're good and ready to, have a discussion?
Yeah.
All right, cool. I just have a couple preliminary issues. First, and I want to ask this, I saw the tweet that you posted with the person who harassed you about your gender. Are you doing all right? Are you all good?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm kind of like, I get that a lot, so it's fine.
Yeah, I was scrolling through and I just took a glance through your Twitter as I was getting ready to, have a conversation with you. And I noticed that, and I just, it's really hard because they invalidated you, or they were trying to say that because you didn't transition yet or something like that. Yeah,
and it's I haven't been able to transition yet, so it's just really dumb as well because I'm planning to, but
okay. Now I do want to, because I assumed going in just from your content, I know that part of your video was I don't know, it might feel a little invalidating to ask pronouns. If you are transitioning, can I this is not meant to invalidate you. I just want to make sure. Can you tell me which pronouns are good to use or good to refer to you by?
They them is good.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I know you've talked a little bit in some of your content about the fact that you want to transition, but you're non-binary. That's something which is a little, which is more new to me. I don't know as many people who are non-binary who do medical transition, although I know it's a thing. I just want to make sure I'm, crossing my T's and dotting my I's. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't have too much. Again, like I said before, like I commented, I largely like your video. I agree with a lot of things that are in it, and I think that like my first glance of you is that you're someone who's operating with like a good degree of good faith. So I definitely, I really appreciate that. And so I don't have like that many other preliminary issues to get to, because usually I use preliminary questions as like a way to suss out if someone is acting in good faith. But I don't think that's too much of an issue, because I don't know, you seem like a pretty cool person. I'm hoping that this will go over like largely cordially. Yeah. Hooray. The last thing I just want to make sure, because you said that at the beginning of your video. So like, and this is just like a very basic thing. Like, you watched the entirety of the debate between Mars and I, right? Oh, like there's not like any, like you didn't just want like you didn't just watch like watch part of it and like not others, right?
Yeah, I watched it multiple times.
Okay. Yeah, that's why I got, because I mean, like at the beginning you said like, it was by the time I finished analyzing this debate, which is over an hour long, I just watched so much footage that my ADHD brain was like, no, we're not. You're not watching anything else. And I was like, okay, so yeah. Okay, I just wanted to make sure before we go ahead, and not like, if we get to a point where I'm like, hey, why didn't you mention this? And you're like, well, I actually didn't watch that. And I'm like,
yeah.
Okay. So the main thing I wanted to bring you on, there are a couple of places where I feel like, and again, this is just me being honest, I feel like you misrepresented me a little bit. And I've mentioned a couple of them. Some of them are small enough that they probably don't need to be discussed explicitly. The main bit has to do with your discussion of Ariel's statement about gender not being a social construct. And if you don't mind, I'd just like to go over what you said in your video so we can start from there.
Okay.
So, okay, cool. So at 9 minutes into your video, you said this. So one of the first things that Riley brings up is that Ariel is transphobic because she says that gender is not a social construct. You then played the clip from our debate. Then you said, now, I find this is a really weird point to bring up, if I'm completely honest, because I think that there are quite a few instances of Ariel being transphobic, but I don't think that's one of them. I don't think that saying gender is not a social construct is transphobic in the slightest. Now, before you get offended, let me explain. Many people have different definitions of what gender is, and from what I can recall, neither Riley nor Mars really kind of explained what their definition was. If you see gender as a sort of amalgamation of all the different societal roles, expectations, and stereotypes, then yes, gender is a social construct. But if you see gender as a sort of intrinsic part of yourself, I don't know, something in your head perhaps, something separate from societal roles and sex, but intrinsic all the same, then no, gender would not be a social construct. And I don't think that makes you transphobic. Quite a few trans people have said that. I said that right, didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
All right. Then you went on to play the clip from our debate about how I showed that was wrong by, according to scientific consensus. Like I cited all the major peer-reviewed studies and like organizations that argue that gender is a social construct and that gender and sex are different, right? The thing I take a little issue with, there are several points I want to talk about here, but I happened to notice that you actually cut out the clip that you showed right before I got to the argument for why Ariel was transphobic in saying this, even though you went on to argue why it wasn't transphobic. I want to go ahead and I want to read that clip from my video to make sure that there's the full context.
Okay.
So after the clip that you played finished, where it starts up is where I say this. So not only does what she say directly contradict modern scientific consensus, but it is also transphobic because the act of saying this has a materially adverse effect on the lives of trans people. This is because if you normalize the idea that gender is not a social construct, then it must be a biological one, and that any trans person who claims to identify contrary to their assigned gender at birth is wrong or lying, which is what Ben Shapiro and others like him argue. So my first question is, why didn't you include that when you seem to make a big, like one of your main arguments in the video was that you disagreed with me on this point about Ariel being transphobic?
Okay, so I think there are probably two things. The first one, I guess I didn't see it as important, which obviously you think it is, but I guess the reason why I didn't is I don't think it's strictly either biological or social. I think, although I agree that gender is a social construct myself, because that's what all the organizations say, but I think a lot of people don't see it as biological or social. They see it as psychological. And so I think saying that gender is kind of like an intrinsic psychological kind of part of your brain or whatever, even if it's kind of wrong, it's not transphobic because you are saying it's different to sex.
So I want to unpack a little bit of that because there's a couple different points there. So first, you don't know. So the first thing that you said was that you didn't include this argument why I said it was transphobic because you didn't think it was important. That's what you're saying?
I guess so. I mean, like, I didn't mean to kind of like misrepresent anything. I think I was just kind of cutting down bits and was like, I think I assumed that it was kind of obvious, I guess. Like, if something's transphobic, the reason it's transphobic is because it harms trans people. So I don't know. I think that would be.
You said in your video that she wasn't transphobic for saying this. So can you go ahead and respond to the argument I did make? Because you didn't respond to my argument in the video that you made where you said that I was wrong or that you disagreed with me. So can you go ahead and respond to the argument that I actually made?
So is your question, why is Ariel saying that gender isn't a social construct? Why is that not transphobic?
Yeah.
Is that your question?
Well, I mean, specifically responding to the argument I made. The argument that I made was that it's transphobic because it broadens this idea that if gender is not societally constructed, then it is biologically constructed. This is rhetoric that's used by all sorts of conservative people, like Ariel, like Ben Shapiro, and many others, to invalidate not only binary trans identity, but non-binary trans identity. So I don't so I don't understand why you would say that this is clearly, quote unquote, not an example of her being transphobic. Like, that's very confusing to me. And the confusion is compounded by the fact that you didn't include my main argument to that effect.
So I think the reason I don't think it's transphobic is because I used to not think gender was a social construct. This was before I knew about kind of all the resources and stuff, but I thought it was a psychological thing. So I don't know, like I used to kind of be of the belief that, I don't know, your brain determines your gender, and kind of well, I mean, I guess it still does, but the brain kind of studies, I guess. So I thought it was a psychological kind of thing. So I guess saying that gender is not a social construct, depending on the circumstance and what the person who's saying it is meaning. If they're like, gender is not a social construct, it's strictly biological and connected to sex, then that would be transphobic. But if you're saying gender's not a social construct, it's a psychological kind of thing, and sex is biological, then I wouldn't say that's transphobic. So I think my issue was that the statement gender is not a social construct is not inherently transphobic. Whether Ariel herself wasn't intending it in a transphobic way is probably a different question. But I guess that was my point.
Well, I guess that's actually something I want to ask you about, because like, I do think, like, this is one of the reasons why I think that you are operating under a degree of good faith, because I'm inclined to agree with you. While I don't think that that mentality that you just elicited is like as scientifically, like, it's not the one that's adopted by like the scientific consensus. I do think it's not like coming from a place of inherent transphobia, right? Like, I understand the semantics of like what you're saying, but I want to like be clear. Like, do you really honestly think that's what Ariel was trying to say here? Like, this is in a video, mind you, where she literally spent like the vast majority of it like trashing on trans people. Do you really think that she like started out with like a statement trying to advocate for the identity of like non-passing or like trans people who just focus on like their internal identification? Like, is that genuinely what you think?
No, I think that wasn't the point I was trying to make as such. But I mean, obviously, I can't know Ariel's mind, but I don't have very positive hopes for Ariel and her transphobia. So,
well, I mean, like we can make pretty strong inferences on what she was trying to say there, right? Like, she literally had a video where, I mean, like, in both of us, mind you, like both of us were in a video talking about how Ariel is transphobic, or a TERF or whatever, right? That just happened recently. That was really cool, right? And like the vast majority of that video went through like the entirety of like just this like 2.5 minute video that Ariel put out, and like how the vast majority of it was just like trashing on trans people. Like we can make a pretty strong assumption that she wasn't exactly trying to advocate for trans rights, right? Like we can make a pretty strong inference, right?
Yes.
So I want, so like when you say that, not only does it omit sort of my argument because you didn't include it, but like you assigned like can we or I won't ask you to necessarily agree with this, but like from where I'm sitting, it seems like you assigned way too much charitability to Ariel's statement. Like you're basically like, it would be like trying to say like, oh yeah, no, I understand that you, Mr. Racist, probably aren't like actually hating on slavery or aren't actually hating on black people by trying to advocate for the economic benefits of slavery. No, you just care about the state. Like, no, this person is clearly a fucking bigot, right? Or at least that's where I'm coming from when I look at this. I can't see it another way.
Yeah, I think I was kind of coming from it at a different angle, rather less of whether Ariel herself saying that was whether Ariel saying that was her being transphobic herself. And I guess I was looking at it whether or not that argument itself was transphobic, because I guess I don't see that argument as transphobic, but I do see Ariel as transphobic. So yeah.
Right. I suppose the point that I want to, like, the point I'm trying to drive here is that, like, context matters a lot, right? I'm inclined to agree that, like, if we were to take that statement and put it in, like, an absolute pure vacuum, devoid of all other context, then I'm inclined to agree with you. Like, that, okay, by itself, it's not necessarily transphobic, but we have to look at the context here, and we have to look at, like, the material effects that this kind of a statement has, especially coming from someone broadcasting to primarily a right-wing audience. She just had on someone who wore a MAGA hat just recently, and I'm sure that there are many other examples. Yeah, exactly, right? And this is someone who went on to, like, Steven Crowder. This is someone, like, went on to Dave Rubin, right? Like, so many far-right. Like, her audience is far-right. Like, that's where she's at right now. She's just done the complete grift. So I think that, like, given the context, like, that's an important reason why to look at this, an important reason why to recognize that, like, this is, I mean, again, to me, like, a very explicit example of transphobia. That's kind of why I started out with it, was because it looked like this seems like the slam dunk. It's kind of like the same kind of slam dunk where it's like when someone references turfisaslur.com as a source, it's not exactly like there's not exactly, I don't feel like there has to be like such a substantive argument from me to point out to the audience who should be, or who I expect to be, like, largely reasonable people to understand why this isn't the greatest thing, right?
I think the reason I kind of criticized that so heavily was because I guess if you view it kind of, I don't know, I guess I can very easily see why Mars wouldn't see that statement as transphobic, because, like you say, if it comes from someone who isn't Ariel, it probably isn't transphobic, you know? So I guess that was probably why I honed in on that point.
I mean, perhaps. I don't know. I mean, if it doesn't come from someone like Ariel, then I'd want to know, like, who it comes from. Like, context always matters with these sort of statements, right? I would always want to make sure that, like, I know, like, if someone were to say this, then given the way that kind of statement has been heavily weaponized against the trans community by a lot of, like, far-right talking pundits and whatever, I would want to get, like, an explicit statement from the person, like an explicit caveat being like, hey, just to be clear, I'm talking about it in this way, not this way, right? Like, that's like the only way I would string that and be like, okay, that seems at least reasonable. Okay. So the reason why, so, like, the reason I brought this all up, and again, like, I want to tie this back to the beginning. Like, this isn't meant to, like, impugn your morality. Like, I'm not trying, like, this isn't, like, that's not the angle I'm trying to work here. But, like, it just makes me a little concerned about a couple other things that you said, and that's kind of like a theme that went through the video. Another thing that you said at 18 minutes into the video, this is where you talked about the clip from our discussion on biological sex. You said the following: now, I don't think it's fair to label Mars as a science denier. You just provided him with a source on the spot and expected him to change his views. If someone presented to me a source on the spot, I'd probably say something like, okay, I hear what you're saying. My current position would be blah-de-blah-de-blah, but I see you presented me with some reputable looking information. I'll have to go away and, I don't know, have a read of it and do some research myself. That's probably what I'd say. But I wouldn't just accept the source because there are so many studies available on the internet and a lot of them are complete bullshit. That's what you said, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, like, there's a couple things that I want to talk about here. Because, again, like, this is another place where I feel like you're assigning a lot of charitability. Like, a lot of charitability. And
I like to do that, which probably is a weakness on my spot, but I like to kind of, I don't know.
No, I mean, like, I get it. I just want to talk about, like, you know, the repercussions of it, because, like, I get it. Like, I also come from a place where I want to assign people charitability, right? I also like, I understand that fundamental, like, want, like, that fundamental pull. We just have to be reasonable because, like, let's be clear, Mars, like, I think that the way that you just talked about, like, the way that you just described, if Mars had responded like that in the middle of our debate, I think that would have gone over very differently than the way it did. I think that we would have had a great discussion, right? Like, I'm all for giving people an opportunity to be able to, like, read sources I provide or be able to talk about them. I offered during the debate, I was like, hey, we can talk about this source. We can go over it as much as you want. Like, if you have any confusion, we can talk about it right now, right? And he just turned it down for no reason other than he just didn't want to talk about it, right? If he had said what you recommended, it would have been a lot better. And I think that if you, like, if I were, I don't know, I don't have any sources I'm going to, like, pull out during the debate, but, like, if I did and you responded that way, then, like, that would be such a better conversation, right? But, like, he didn't act that way, right? And I think it's important to recognize that, like, if someone is just going to make it tough for me for the sake of being tough, then, like, I'm going to respond in the way that, like, I've been taught to throughout my years of debating, right? Like, I don't think that's necessarily unreasonable for me to act that way, right?
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah.
And another thing I want to talk about, and this is just, like, something that I was interested in discussing. So I want to make sure I understand, like, your mentality with this. So what you're saying is that, like, if you are presented with evidence which challenges a belief that you hold, that you would eventually read that information and then see if it challenges it. And if it does challenge your belief to the effect that, like, it's very reasonable and well-founded and it completely, you know, defeats or whatever, it completely contradicts your view, whatever it is, that you would eventually realize, like, okay, I was wrong. I'm going to just learn from this and move on, right? Like, that's...
Oh, definitely. I mean, like I said, I used to didn't think that gender was a social construct, but then, you know, you read the evidence and you're like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Change your mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how long ago, I'm just asking because I can't remember off the top of my head, how long ago was my debate with Mars? Was it a week and like a couple weeks? Like, how long ago was it? Like 2 weeks? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, 2 or 3 weeks, I think. A few weeks, yeah. 2 or 3. I can't quite remember.
During that time, has Mars come out with a video talking about how he had reviewed the evidence I presented him and how he actually determined that, oh shit, I was wrong about biological sex and I was wrong about gender, and I'm so sorry, trans community, for saying all these things and holding these beliefs? Like, did he ever release any of that sort of kind of video?
Not to my knowledge, but I don't know. No.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can safely assume no, but...
Well, I mean, I've looked through and I can tell you certifiably he's not. In fact, he's on, like, outspoken transphobes like Blair White and Rose of Dawn. So, yeah, very much the opposite. So, yeah, like, the point I'm trying to get at is that, like, I understand that you want to ascribe him a lot of good faith and charitability, but he's literally, like, if he had done even the same thing that you had ascribed to him to do, like, even the same thing that you, being a good faith actor, would have gone out and done, like, he hasn't done that to any effect. I gave him the evidence. You even agreed with me that it's pretty reputable in your video. And, like, he hasn't changed his mind. In fact, he's just kind of dug his heels in. So the reason I bring this up is because, like, he's not the person that you think he is, Mo. Like, I really want to try and get that across.
I feel very kind of backstabby to go on here and trash talk him, as he's always been very nice to me. So, like, regardless of whether you think his views are kind of shitty,
I'm not trying to talk about... Well, I mean, all right. This is actually sort of, I mean, like, this is sort of important, right? And I'm not asking, like, I'm not asking you to necessarily backstab him, right? I'm not trying to put you into, like, this position, right? But, like, this is something that I noticed from, like, your Twitter and, like, this video, and we'll only talk about this video because that's the only thing I asked you to talk about, right? But like, I know that you, like you said in your video, like you consider Mars a friend, and like you've been on his show before, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And something that you said in your video, actually, I really would like to ask you about. So you said at 1 minute and 22 seconds in your video. Now, I'd guess that Riley would probably argue that Mars is transphobic, but just hold on to that because I'll be getting to stuff like that later in the video. You never actually talked about why Mars, in your opinion, was not transphobic. I was waiting for that. I heard that and I was like, oh, I want to hear this argument. And you never gave it. So can you give that argument? Like, can you tell me why you think he's not?
Well, I guess there's probably a few things. I doubt anything. I'll just say this here. I doubt anything I'm going to say here will change your mind. But I think I don't know. I think there are a few things to take into consideration. The first being I'm sorry. I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. I guess you can argue that some of the things he may believe kind of would be the type of things that transphobes typically would agree with more, but in the grand scheme of things, he is accepting of like trans people and transitioning, and he is accepting of non-binary people. Like, you know, he thinks I'm trans, he calls me by my pronouns. So I think labeling him as like a flat out transphobe, I can't get behind that. I can see why someone might criticize his specific beliefs and be like, I think those are transphobic, but I don't think you can, you know, label him as a transphobe and it be correct.
What's your definition of a transphobe then?
Well, I guess somebody who, you know, advocates against trans people or holds transphobic, I don't know, yeah.
Well, I mean, if it's someone who holds transphobes and like he has transphobic, or if it's someone who holds transphobic beliefs and by your own admission he has transphobic beliefs, then that seems to fit the bill, right? Again, I'm not trying to put you in the box. In fact, you don't need to answer this. Maybe I'll ask you a different question because I'm really trying to figure out how you think. What are your opinions on, because Mars recently had a stream, like very recently, where he talked for, I think it was like a couple hours with Blair White and Rose of Dawn. Do you consider either of them to be transphobic?
I think it's similar with Mars. I mean, like, obviously, I just to make it clear, I don't have any love for like their beliefs. I think I have much more of a problem with Blair White than I do with Rose of Dawn. I made a video criticizing both of them, but with the Rose of Dawn video that I criticized, she messaged me and said that she thought some of my criticisms were good. And
did she actually change what she did after you made that criticism? It's interesting that she responded like thoughtfully. Did she actually change her content after you criticized her?
I don't really watch them on a regular basis, but I can probably pretty strongly suspect no.
Yeah, so like this is the thing, right? And this is sort of the reason why I wanted to talk to you about this, right? Is that like I want you to understand very clearly that this is not a good crowd to get mixed up in. And I looked at your Twitter and I know that you even follow Rose of Dawn, and I know that you're very like, and I don't know like how close you are to her. Like I don't know the extent that you're close to her.
Had like sent like 2 messages and she sent me 1, so no, we're not.
Yeah. Like I just want to be clear that like, you know, I and again, I don't know the nature of the extent of your relationship with her or like with Mars or with any of the people of these crowd, but like this is not a good crowd to get mixed up in. And I think that what's happening here is that like you seem like someone who fundamentally does assign a lot of good faith and charitability to people that you're criticizing, which is an awesome quality. You seem like a stand-up, wonderful, wonderful person. And like that's the reason why I wanted you on here. And I'm really hoping we can be friends after this. But like my biggest fear is that like you end up taking like and again, like, I don't know why you assign charitability to them. Maybe you think you can win them over. Maybe there are some things that you fundamentally do agree with them on, which are probably not like the most popular takes in the trans community. Like, I don't know what your reasoning is, but like, just be aware that like, there are a couple takes in this video, like the take that we talked about for a little bit, and like it seems like you've changed your stance on that, and that's a good take, right? Like that I would be like, yeah, cool, good shit. But like just be aware that like the more that you associate with these people, and the more that you kind of like either try to engage, like not necessarily like you can engage with their beliefs all that you want, but like engage in them in such a way where it's like you're trying to be like friends with them. I want you to be aware of like two things that like very likely could happen that I'm very afraid of, right? The first is that like a lot of people like, because I mean like you're growing up, like, and I mean I am too, right? We're relatively small channels, like let's be real. We haven't really been put through the ringer in the way that a lot of larger content creators have been, right? So we can make a lot of mistakes, and there's not that big of a backlash that we will experience as creators, right? But like but like Mars and Blair White and Rose of Dawn, they're the kind of people who have takes that like the larger trans community just like outright admonishes, because they are implicitly transphobic, at least according to like the vast majority consensus. That's the reason why they basically have like their own little club of channels, and they do like everything together, and they feature each other as much as they possibly can because they have no one else to turn to, right? And I really don't want you to be to put yourself in a position where you're both criticized by the larger trans community, but then also like where you have this tenuous sort of relationship with these people, and they're like, hey, I see you've been criticized a lot by like the majority trans community. So have we. Maybe you should get closer to us. Maybe you should start doing things that we want. Maybe you should start saying these things that we say that maybe, you haven't thought about a lot, or maybe you haven't like developed hard opinions on, but maybe, you want to just like join our club. Maybe you want to be like our token non-binary person. That's my big fear, right?
Yeah. I think I doubt that would happen, simply because nothing kind of makes me more than being a token non-binary. And also I think I like to engage with people I disagree with, because I feel like at the moment there is such a divide within the community. And although like I say I kind of typically agree a lot more with your beliefs, I think if nobody is willing to engage or be friends with these people who do have different views, then the divide's not going to kind of get smaller. There's always going to be the divide if no one is willing to talk. But I see where you're coming from, and I think I don't have any worry of me becoming some kind of true scum trans medicalist crazy I can't see that happening.
So I mean like, and I definitely like, I get the appeal of that idea. I just want you to all like, I suppose that the main thing I want you to take away from this is like, you can be ambitious. I think that's a very ambitious and a very like fundamentally altruistic sort of perspective to take. But like, I want you to make sure that first that you're being careful, right? Like make sure that, you are watching out for yourself, but also like, remember to always act reasonably, right? Like we have at least two examples from this discussion, both Mars and from Rose of Dawn, where not only you criticized Rose of Dawn, and Rose of Dawn responded and positively responded, but fundamentally didn't change her content. And then I criticized Mars, and I criticized him in a lot of ways, and he hasn't changed anything. I want you to understand that, like, I get the appeal of trying to change the minds of these other content creators. I just don't see it being that reasonable. Someone in my Twitter actually said it really well the other day, and I've been thinking about it a lot, right? Where YouTube really isn't about like fun, like sometimes there's some interaction between different communities, but fundamentally it's about people who largely try to argue to their own echo chambers. Now I do agree fundamentally, like that's not great, and that's like a very messed up system. But like it does go to the effect that like it's so hard to actually change someone's mind, because not only on this platform, like it's easier to change like people who watch, like viewers, it's a little easier because they don't have like a viewer base to appeal to. But when you have someone who has like a platform they built up on like a very specific set of ideas, and you basically challenge the basis of those ideas, they're not going to change their idea. Or if it is, it's like the hardest thing to do. The only example of this, and this is why I have to say that it's not impossible, the only example of this is Hunter Avalone, who went against giant
Massive
monetary
respect to
yeah
him.
exactly, but like the reason why we celebrated that a ton is because it's just so unreasonable to expect that. And even before then, he had like a wide reputation of having like very nuanced takes within like the sort of right community, right being like politically right. Like he had a sort of like predisposed reputation where he was going to entertain more nuanced thought. When we're talking about Blair White, Rose of Dawn, Transbra, whatever, like they are not engaging in nuanced thought. They're basically like they parrot the same basic three ideas. That's why they're able to like basically collaborate on whatever content they do. Right. So I want you to just be aware that like I get the idea of trying to change these people's minds, but just be aware that realistically that's probably not going to get you what you want. You're probably going to end up spinning your wheels a lot, and that it might be better served for you to do your like spend your time making other content. I don't know, like talk about like literally anything else. Talk about your experience as non-binary person. Talk about like your life or like other there's so much stuff you can do, and I don't want to say what you do, right? Like there, you know, it's a giant sea and there's fish and yada yada. I don't know where I was going with that.
I think it's not just about bridging the divide between them, because the people who watch them, I guess they're primarily either kind of right-wing people or kind of like other trans people who agree with what they're saying. And I think if somebody who kind of shares their views and is trans can come across one of my videos and then kind of see that and be like, oh, maybe I was wrong. And then so we're bridging the divide in the community, whether it's with these big figures or not. So like, I guess while I criticize them, it's because they're kind of a perfect example of these views. And so I guess part of it is so maybe they can see it, but I guess the majority of it is so that other people can see it. Yeah.
All right. And I can, like, again, like, I'm not going to tell you what to make. So, like, if you think that you can thread that line, then, you know, go ahead. Just, I want you to make sure, I just want you to make sure that, like, understand that that is playing with some fire. Because, like, the largest danger that you can run into in engaging with their ideas is to eventually start commingling your ideas with theirs until the point where it's hard to tell where they begin and you end, right?
That's a fair criticism, yeah.
So just like, again, do what you want. I like my biggest hope is that like a year or two from now that I'm not criticizing you for being like the next wannabe Blair White but non-binary.
Oh God, no, never.
Yeah, just like
I think we fundamentally disagree on far too much for that ever to happen.
Okay, thank you. All right, that's really the main point I wanted to get across.
Yeah.
I don't really have anything else. Is there anything else that you want to talk about?
I don't think so. I think that was kind of, yeah, I just kind of made the video, I guess, and yeah, I didn't know if anything would come of it, but yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, hey, thank you for coming on. Do you want to like shout out your social media, your YouTube, whatever?
Oh yeah. Sure. So my YouTube channel is just Mo Stebbings, like in the title, and my kind of Instagram and Twitter are CopsHateMoe.
Yeah. Wait, what's this? I have to ask the question. Why is it CopsHateMoe?
Okay, so story time. So when I was 16, I started getting into street art, and this was like before I came out and everything. So I was still going by my birth name, and my alias, I guess, was Mo. And I went. So I used to go around just kind of doing little street art around the town. One of my paintings got in the newspaper, which was cool. But one day I was painting underneath a bridge, and this policeman he comes and walks past, and he looks down and he sees me just under the bridge, and he's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, hi." And then he was like, "It's dangerous down there." And I was like, "Okay." And then he sees that I'm painting, and he's like, "Are you painting?" And I was like, "Yep." And then he just walked away. So yeah, that's.
Oh my God, that's hilarious! Wonderful. Yeah, awesome. All right, well, hey, thank you for so much coming on, and yeah, let's talk again sometime. All right.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
That was a good talk.